Are you concerned about closing costs here in the state of Georgia? Most of the time I hear sellers say, I'm not paying any closing costs, and buyers saying, well, I need help with closing costs. But oftentimes they don't even know what that really looks like or what it means. So I'm gonna go ahead and spend the time with you reviewing an actual net sheet line by line so we can discuss what the seller pays and what the buyer pays. Now this is a traditional, they didn't ask for any fees, they didn't ask for any credits, and this is the way that it lined out on the net sheet. The first thing that a seller is required to pay is the payoff and handling fee. In this case, with this attorney, it was $50. One other thing that you cannot get away from and is pretty much the responsibility of a seller and buyer, and it is prorated for the amount of time that you're in the home, are city and county taxes. You can see the good through date, which is obviously 1/1 to the closing date. Now, you'll also see that the debits are to the seller because those are the parts of the property that they were in the property already. So they're paying their portion of the taxes. The second portion that a seller pays are the commissions. Anybody who has a listing is going to understand that it's the seller's responsibility to pay the realtor commissions. And traditionally, that is the biggest fee for a seller. Also with this purchase, if you have an HOA, $98.76 was the HOA initiation fee and $148 of water bill. Now, those are the simple fees that are paid for by the seller on the closing. So let's count them. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 fees that a seller pays when closing on their property. A buyer, on the other hand, has a whole other list of things to include if they didn't ask for closing cost credits. Now here's where it gets interesting, and the majority of buyers' closing costs don't come from traditional things. So let's talk about this and dive into this. A buyer's closing costs here in, actually this property was in Sugar Hill, are the county taxes. You're going to actually pay your portion. They prepay your taxes, your property county taxes. You're also going to have an administration fee to the lender, or not all lenders have it. But you'll see there that it's $1,125. After closing fee, you have $140 from the attorney. The credit report, $77.75. Again, these costs are variable. However, these are fees that you should estimate to be included in your closing costs. Also is a prepaid interest. So these people actually weren't closing for a while. So you have to pay for every day of interest of the month up until your first mortgage payment. That's prepaid interest. Now here's where it gets tricky. The next line are your impounds. So if you include your property taxes and your homeowner's insurance within your payment, it's called impounding your account. Those are your PITI, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. Now, one thing that people don't understand often is most lenders require that you collect 6 months at least of taxes and insurance ahead of time and keep them in your escrow account. That ends up being one of the biggest chunks of your closing costs that you have to bring to the table. So keep in mind, those fees are yours. That is your bank requiring that you prepay 6 months of taxes and interest. This has nothing to do with the seller. Those are buyer fees. In this case, the homeowner's insurance was $348 just for the 3 months. The property taxes were $542 for 12 months. That's huge, $6,511.44. The city taxes were $681. Here's the other part of the buyer's big chunk of money. Recording fees, $59.50. Provident funding, $10. Intangible tax, that's the tax here for the state of Georgia. The deed, $520. Now here's also title fees. Title is $50. Lender, $1443. The attorney, $750. Title exam, $250. Owner's policy, $1273.80. Now you'll also see at the very bottom where it says homeowners insurance premium, Progressive, $13.95. So you can see that the buyer does have to bring in quite a bit of money, but these are not relative to the seller. These are relative to the buyer's new loan. Any bank or any mortgage company is going to require that clear title is provided for them to lend you money on this house. So it's imperative to understand what your closing costs are. If you're going to go ahead and ask the seller for some credits, you're going to want to say they're for recurring and non-recurring closing costs, which mean they can be for property taxes, they can be for a rate buy down, they can be for whatever. And that is on page 1 of your Georgia contract. It's about in the middle of the page. It says closing costs credits. That's where it goes in that box right there. If you're a seller and you're looking at offers, you want to make sure and consider that as well. As you can see in the wonderful state of Georgia, the seller doesn't have as many fees. Their largest fee is the commission. On the buyer side, they have a larger breakdown of fees for title insurance, lender fees. A lot of the fees that are required on the buyer side are related to the loan. That is not a seller responsibility unless it's asked for and negotiated in the contract. You want to make sure that you have a property specific net sheet worked out for you before you make your offer. That's what I ask of my lenders, and I often ask my clients to look at what the payment will be on this property specifically, including your homeowner's dues, including the property taxes. And you should make sure to budget in there for an increase in property taxes as well. Make sure that you're comfortable with your down payment and there are no surprises. You don't want to get 4 days in and do your inspections and recognize that you don't have enough money to put down. So for most of my clients, I recommend, especially on the buyer side, that they get a net sheet drawn up before we make the offer so they're comfortable with their down payment unless we need to negotiate more credits. I'm Jennifer Lewis, and I'm happy to share with you more technical details of your home buying and selling process here in Georgia. You're welcome to call me with any questions, 470-326-7077, or find me at movetogeorgia.org.